Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to FCM's webinar, Don't Be Cringe, Why Your Travel Program Probably Needs a Gen Z Makeover. My name is Emma Graham. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Leader at Flight Center Travel Group Americas. Joining me today, we have a really exciting panel of experts coming from a wide variety of perspectives. It's going to be a great conversation. To introduce ourselves, I'd like to start with Lydia.
Hello, guys. My name is Lydia Pagliarani. I'm a marketing account executive with FCM, and I am an actual Gen Zer.
Thank you, Lydia. So happy that you're here with us today. Tyler, please go ahead.
My name is Tyler Hosford. I'm a security director with International SOS, and I help people think about travel security from a lot of different demographics and backgrounds and how you think about your individual travel profile.
Awesome. Glad you're here, Tyler. And last but definitely not least, Daniel.
Hi, I'm Daniel Senyard, and I work within Flight Center Travel Group, heading up a lot of our AI and innovation initiatives, how we kind of work and communicate with end travelers while they're on the road.
Awesome. Thank you so much, everybody, for being here today. We're going to start off the conversation by stopping and thinking, what exactly makes a Gen Z? So we've, as you put in your thoughts into the chat function, we asked around our office to see who actually is Gen Z? What are the characteristics? We got a few different interesting answers. The first being the stance on skinny jeans and ankle socks. I'm pretty sure that's definitely thumbs down, anti-skinny jeans. Of course, we got an answer 1996 to 2010 birth years, maybe. And also things like Gen Z have always had access to technology. They expect to have information right at their fingertips. They really value a strong user interface. They're internet natives. And we also got responses such as they're new to the workforce. They value humor. They value authenticity. I'd like to hear from our panelists really quickly what it is that you all think it means to be a Gen Z. Lydia, why don't you start us off?
I would say with my generation, we're kind of all about change in a lot of ways. So that can be socially, interpersonally, making things happen that previous generations maybe haven't before. And of course, there's more facts along with that, which I believe you'll share later on.
Mm-hmm. Tyler, how about you?
What makes when we see Gen Zers, it's a generation that really embraces getting the most out of life. And so if you're on a business trip, the Gen Zer is more likely to do the bleisure thing and take a few extra days or take some time during a workshop to go do something else. Really effective at getting information quickly, sharing information quickly, disseminating information through social media, a lot of different channels.
Awesome. How about you, Daniel?
I think, like you said, being digitally native, growing up in tech, there's really an expectation that they don't need to be told how to do things and what to do. You know, tech products should be intuitive. They don't need someone guiding them, looking over their shoulder. So really expecting those sort of intuitive experiences and not necessarily accepting the sort of status quo. It's not like you should do this just because. Like it needs to be logical, rational, and contextually relevant. So I think that sort of like ownership and understanding and ability to navigate and discover themselves, I think is pretty important.
Really interesting. Thank you, everybody. So I'd like to share a little bit of research with you all that came out of Cal State University, Fullerton in 2021. And so they developed a framework for leveraging the uniqueness of the Gen Z generation. And they came up with this research-based framework or mnemonic called Ditto. So basically, when you think Gen Z, think Ditto. Really what Ditto is to help organizations find specific ways to support Gen Zers, leverage their strengths and what makes them unique as a generation in order to benefit their organization and benefit their workforce. So in Ditto, D stands for diversity. Obviously, when we're talking about generations, we certainly can think about age diversity. There's 5 generations in the workforce right now. Thinking about the different stages of life, different life experiences that people are at is certainly a key part of diversity. However, there's also so many other different diversity dimensions to think of, including gender, race, faith, immigration, sexuality, disability, neurodiversity. And really what it comes down to, what the researchers were stressing that Gen Z really values is that you are proactive when it comes to diversity, equity, and inclusion. There are so many different identities and diversity of experiences and values represented by Gen Z. And they really value having proactive strategic thinking and a really robust DEI program when it comes to your policies, your culture, your communication, and absolutely your travel program as well. This is not a one size fits all type of thing. We're going to speak on it a little bit later. But for example, there's a really strong representation of LGBTQ plus identities in Gen Z, and that's going to have an impact on the way that you do business, the way that you work, the way that you travel. And so just thinking about when you're targeting Gen Z, the ones who are currently in your organization, the ones who are yet to come, you really need to have diversity as a proactive sort of foundational approach. Next, we have both individualism and teamwork. So what the researchers found was that Gen Z scored higher when it comes to individualism compared to some older employees and older demographics. So really the key here is to balance that high individualism, that high need for having a customization, being flexible, while also finding ways for keyword meaningful teamwork. As Daniel alluded to, having really clear, transparent explanations for what is the benefit, why are we doing this, and finding ways to sort of integrate Gen Z and create opportunities for cross learning, intergenerational collaboration, and creating again those opportunities for working together. Next, we have, again, a really obvious one is a technology piece. As digital natives, really we need to focus on effective communication when it comes to digital channels, specifically on mobile. So we're thinking about our app, we're thinking about, our mobile browser or any other communication platform that we're using, even things like AI, even things like, chat functions. Are those channels all optimized in order to really reach the Gen Z audience effectively? And then finally, O is for organizational support. So this is things like, are we recognizing great work? Are we providing initiatives to help improve well-being? Are we providing programming for brightness of future and professional development? Thinking about mentorship pairs, reverse mentorship, peer-to-peer learning as well, where we can really allow Gen Z to share their skills and their strengths with the workforce. And also sort of learn the ropes from the other employees in your workforce as well. So altogether, kind of balancing these values in mind is really key when it comes to developing strategies that target Gen Z effectively. Now, I wanted to highlight a couple of characteristics as well that really sets Gen Z apart from some of the other demographics that you might see in your workforce and that you might see traveling for business. For our purposes, you see the sort of the age range here between 97 and 2012. Those are the birth years. And if you think about what that means in terms of life experiences, you can imagine why it's going to have an impact on the way that you work and the way that you travel. So again, first and foremost, 28% of Gen Zers identify as LGBTQ. So almost 1/3 of that demographics workforce identify as queer. And so some research that came out in 2021 from the University of Texas at Austin found that not only is Gen Z much more comfortable coming out, but they're also doing at a much earlier age, and they're also using some newer labels. So thinking about pansexual, queer, non-binary, and so on. What this means for your program as you think about how to develop something that is relevant to your Gen Z workforce is what are those unique considerations for LGBTQ plus travelers when it comes to managing risk and safety, communicating what to expect, for example, going through security at the airport when it comes to if you have an X or U gender marker on your passport, if you're checking in at your hotel, are you going to feel safe when you're taking your transfers from your hotel to an event? And so really at this point, you need to assume that every business every business trip is going to have LGBTQ plus representation. Of course, this is true for every generation, but is especially salient for the Gen Zers. Um, Also, we really want to think about mental health and mental well-being. Gen Zs grew up in kind of constant crisis. There's research that came out of the APA in 2019 that found that as many as 75% of Gen Z survey respondents identified that significant source of daily stress as a result of mass shootings, as a result of the climate crisis. We're thinking about Gen Z as really connected to global events, really connected to what's happening around the world, and also really connected to their own mental health needs. A majority, according to the survey, our report having received treatment or ongoing treatment from a mental health professional. So this demographic is really in touch with their mental health needs, whether that's a mental disability or just knowing what it is they need in terms of supports and what they expect from their organization. This is really going to impact as well the decisions they make about their work, about their business travel as well. Not to mention, this is a cohort of people who are entering into the workforce mostly at a time of great economic uncertainty and health uncertainty as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic. It really changes your experience. So, understanding a little bit more of that context of Gen Z, I just want to invite you to stop and think and maybe add your comments in the chat as well. What is it that you yourself value as a business traveler? What do you expect? What are you hoping for? I'd love to hear from the panel on this. Maybe starting with Daniel.
Yeah, so basically, as we're sort of outlining here, there's a lot of different tech tools, but what becomes difficult is the complexity of the tools. If you're having to go to one app for your itinerary, another one for your communications, your email app, your booking if you need to make a change, chat. So it really gets quite a complex web, and so simplifying that I think is pretty important, and that's where things like AI that can start to normalize and centralize some of these communications becomes incredibly important. And the problem with a lot of the risk around travel, whether it's LGBTQ plus or just people going to high risk areas, is at the moment or historically the onus has been on the traveler to find that sort of information and make sure they're up to date. So a big step forward is really trying to surface that hyper relevant information to the traveler when it's most relevant and important to them, instead of expecting them to sort of find that. So yeah, there's a lot of stuff that we kind of need to keep evolving on for those purposes.
I agree with Daniel there. Streamlined communication is super important with my generation. And just going off that first point here, just an example of this could be ensuring that booking, flight, hotel, rental cars are all in one place versus several different apps. A lot of communication can be overlooked or processes can be convoluted because of that. And with the logins as well, we all know it's hard to keep track of our passwords, and things like biometrics, Face ID login becomes way easier in that regard. And then point number 2 here, being clear, direct, and concise. Having those convoluted policies that might just live in a PDF or have always lived in a PDF, again, easy to overlook, really important information. So a solution for that could be maybe summing up in a bullet point and attaching the longer version of an important policy in an email or whatever channel you're going off of. And then Daniel later on will show everyone what the push notifications can look like in real time, contextually. And point number 4 here, safety and risk with policy information for my generation. Of course, that's always of utmost importance here. So this could look like if I'm an LGBTQ plus traveler and I'm asked to go to a country that maybe isn't as safe for someone like me, I'd want to fully understand the risk of that and why it could be unsafe. And then I want to also understand, with our last point here in the slide, where I could potentially turn to as a safe place to let someone know why I wouldn't feel comfortable going on that business trip. So this might be a point of contact, like an HR person, going to them and explaining why this may not work for me. And next here with adapting policy. So going off of Emma's question of what's important for a Gen Z traveler, for me, this is certainly leisure. So combining business and leisure, prioritizing wellness. I'd say what really kind of launched me into this idea is COVID, and having, travel kind of taken away, and all the benefits that come with it. So when I travel, I want to be sure that that wellness is in check. And this can look like things of, if it's a long trip, I want to be sure I can maybe get into an airport lounge, or having Wi-Fi so I can work on my trip and things of that regard. And then with the risk assessment of the travel location, in this location, is there political unrest? Is there extreme weather? And where can I look to know what to do in an emergency situation? Again, is that communication streamlined? Does it live somewhere where I can quickly access it on my phone, versus, spread out in an email or just other channels?
One of the
And
things
then,
sorry, I just want to tell you, one of the things that we see with risk, and Emma alluded to it with, if you have an X or a U on your passport, as we shifted into the LGBTQ plus, we're now moving into a lot of those identifiers are now on a passport, understanding what countries may not recognize that. And so if you have that on your passport, what does that look like for somebody going there? What are the steps that may need to be taken, as well as what is the law versus what are the cultural norms with what someone might face in reality when they're on a trip there?
definitely. Great point there. And for that risk management strategy, that also ties into social media. So I know that my generation, we are glued to our phones, social media. We want to always put our best foot forward with that, which of course can be a bad thing if I'm posting, my passport, or tagging a airport, my location, maybe showing, my travel schedule. So of course, those can be more dangerous things when it comes to individual safety on a trip. But Tyler will explain a bit later on how this can actually be used in a more positive way, especially when it comes to positioning your company in a positive light. And then incorporating DEI into your travel program. I know Emma should just touch on this a little bit, but just ensuring that certain, hotels, accommodation, whatever the trip might entail, is keeping in mind all sorts of disabilities. So maybe the accommodation would be better for someone who's disabled, or maybe if the trip or flight is very long, allowing for an extra day on each side of that trip, or allowing for a day to work remotely, just ensuring that that wellness stays in check. So moving on here, not getting lost in translation, kind of summing up a bit of what we talked about. So just Gen Z always living in an information overload. There's so many communication channels that are bombarding us at all times. So just making sure that the really important information is coming through live over text notifications or whatever app we may be relying on for travel. And again, Daniel will show an example of this later, but having that decision support tech ingrained in those different programs. So having time of booking notifications, or say if it's the weather example, ensuring that I'm aware of what I'm getting into and the steps I need to take to make sure that I'm safe and know what's going on. And then again, email and message boards are less effective these days. While they can still be great, and depending on how your company uses them, I certainly rely much heavier on push notifications and texts, like for an example of airlines saying what gate I need to go to, or how long it's going to take, or maybe my gate change. So just keeping that in mind for communication channels.
Yeah, absolutely. And to your point about incorporating diversity, equity, and inclusion policies, I mean, diversity is a fact of life. And I love the sort of leaning into the individualism that Gen Z embraces. It's just really about understanding that it's not about one size fits all. Not every traveler's profile is going to be a little bit different. And the best way to set up our teams for success is to understand those differences, understand those unique needs. And so, the fact that Gen Z is really embracing that, and certainly as more Gen Z is added to the workplace, I think it's really in the best interest for every organization to be proactive, to be on top of things, to really understand, cultural competency, to really understand the different ways that we can make travel and working more accessible, more accommodating for different neurotypes, different abilities, and so on. I really love that you brought up that point, Lydia.
Yeah, definitely agree on that. And I think too, just going off of that, I think Gen Z also seek out workplaces that embody that. I know you touched on that already, but ensuring that you are living your individualistic identity through work as well is so important, and to have that recognized and supported is great. So just jumping into point one here of valuing efficiency with convoluted policies that might not make as much sense. So for example, if I'm to go into a system to get reimbursed for an expense, fully understanding upfront maybe what those expense policies are, again, having all that information in one place right in front of me is super helpful. And point two here, just being practical, understanding the full scope of, say, a policy change. Maybe a company allowed for business class at one point, but now it's changed to economy only. I want to be able to understand why that change happened, how it's going to affect me. And maybe if it's for cutting costs, I just want to be able to understand that and then be okay with the change. And then our last point, like we've talked about, wellness is paramount. So just ensuring that policies align with having that balance. Of course, we want to show up refreshed to work, being able to carry out our tasks. So in order to do that, again, offering an extra day on either end, offering lounge access, maybe there's some flexibility with ordering room service or something like that. So just accommodating those needs and ensuring that the traveler is good to go.
So social media is really one where, and Lydia touched on it, where there's a lot that is so valuable with it, but a lot that can really go wrong. And so when we talk about safety and security, that first point, embrace the later, Graham, where play a game with yourself next time you see someone in the airport or someone that's on a trip. See what you can piece together just by seeing what's being posted, just by seeing what somebody has, what they're wearing, what you can see from their social media, because you can identify a lot of information as far as where they're staying, what they're doing, if they might not be at their house. That creates a lot of safety concerns. You want to make sure that your company policy on social media does match with your travel policy. There have been some instances where you see companies have certain policies that are only applicable on travel, but not in their company policy. And that creates some confusion, especially when you have people that might be doing the bleisure thing where they're taking some time afterwards and they're unsure as far as what actually applies to them. I think one of the things that we always get asked in the security space is the concerns about TikTok. And I think there's no question that there's a very lively debate around that. And there's not necessarily a right or a wrong answer for companies on this one, but you want to make sure that everybody, and this is not just Gen Zers, but all travelers understand what are some of the concerns around that, what is the data privacy, the data collection, and then especially this becomes really applicable if you have people that are using company issued devices. What social media apps are appropriate to download and have on that company device? Things like LinkedIn, very important, very powerful tools for business. There's a lot of parts of the world where social media platforms are very prevalent and used heavily for business. So you can't just have a blanket policy of you cannot download social media because that's going to hamper the business objectives of a trip. But you do want to make sure that people understand that they're thinking about what are the concerns, what are the things to be aware of, because everything that can be so powerful for helping business can also be used for that social engineering idea. The way that somebody can identify a lot of information, perhaps get information about you, about your company that you may not necessarily want being made public.
I agree with that, Tyler. Also, just going off of your point there, not having a blanket policy, I think that ties in really well with Gen Z not being as open to just being told something versus fully understanding why a policy is a certain way, having, the reality of internet and social media and anything technology being so ingrained in us, it's hard to be told that you can't have that in your work life.
When we look at it, people always say, well, what are the risks that I have with my different traveling groups? And again, at the beginning, when people ask, when we asked the question, what makes Gen Z, or where I talked about a group that really embraces travel, the ability to go do some of these things, there's no question that Gen Z takes greater risks. The data's out there. That's just the reality. That's not necessarily a bad thing. It just means that as a company, with travelers, you need to understand what are the guardrails to be able to have in place with that. When you have that risk factor with those that are part of the LGBTQ plus community, what does that mean for your travelers? The other major aspect to that, what does that mean for other travelers that might not be Gen Z or might not identify as part of that community? The whole concept of allyship is so important for Gen Z right now, especially as you have people that may be at different stages on their journey. And so understanding some of these things that companies can have in place, as far as how do we approach social events when we're on business travel? What is the policy that we have around leisure, around the ability to take some extra time, the ability to do a few outside of the office type things? Let's say we have meetings all morning. If we want to go and we want to go do a hike in the afternoon, or if you're somewhere that you can go whitewater rafting or rock climbing, these are things that Gen Z really embraces being able to get out and go do, but it also raises some of the risks that are associated with that. That last point, and Lydia referenced it, the idea of just being direct, being upfront. Gen Z appreciates the candor. And for what it's worth, I think most people probably do as well. Being clear and direct about what the policies are. Companies don't need to apologize for having policies, because the policies are not necessarily in place for that mindset of we're preventing you from doing something. Rather, the policies are designed to create a framework where you can be the best traveling version of yourself. We talk a lot about why people choose to work for a company, that employment value proposition. When somebody can say, my company empowers me when I travel, they help me prepare for my individual risk profile as whatever I identify as, whether it's the pronouns I have, whether it's my demographic background, my racial background, based on what I have and where I'm going, I have the preparation that I need. My company allows me to do leisure things, and they have clear policies around that so that I'm not going to make a mistake there. When people start hearing about that, that's a great reason for why people say, I want to stay working for a company. Or people go and tell their friends, hey, look, my company has this great policy. All of a sudden, that's a recruitment and a retention policy in a way that travel policies never really were. Travel benefits and travel perks were always a big thing, but the idea of a travel policy being there to enable people to go and be that best version of themselves, that's really a new way to think about it, and one that the companies that can embrace that really find a lot of success with having happy travelers, people that want to stay with the company, and bringing in new talent.
Thank you so much, Tyler and Lydia. Really interesting insights that they bring to this conversation. Before we move into sort of how we apply technology, how we see sort of bringing this to life, just a couple of thoughts to remember. Obviously, we're not trying to stereotype, anyone based off of their age or any other demographic or identity. Really, when it comes down to it, you need to know your individual employees, your individual travelers. I cannot, stress enough the value of collecting, that kind of data, that kind of feedback, whether it's in the form of surveys, whether it's the form of, qualitative data like focus groups, and really just drilling into the experiential data and sort of having that feedback loop, really understanding the nuances of each of your travelers, of each of those sort of risk profiles. So again, this is not about treating Gen Z or any other group as a monolith, but sort of helping you to understand, based on some of the research, what are some trends, what are some things that you can think about and be proactive about, as well as incorporating all of that data from your employees. And again, nothing is constant but change. So, thinking about how do we understand some of the evolving travel styles of our workforce, especially as there's going to be more of that representation of Gen Z in your organization. Just keeping an eye on some of the ways that travel styles might be different than what you're used to from some of the previous generations. Um, and of course, making sure, again, accurate traveler information so you can provide the most effective risk support. You can have, communication strategies that are very relevant and very effective. I'd love to hand it over to Daniel to sort of guide us through in action. How do we use technology in ways that can really address some of the needs and the pain points that Gen Z travelers have?
Thank you. Yeah, so I wanted to show you, at your company, most companies, you have a long travel policy. This is an example of one that's broken into multiple steps or multiple pages that lives somewhere in the intranet, and you get given it when you start and then forget about it. So I wanted to show you how, anyone who has access to ChatGPT, and obviously follow your company's rules, but what I'm showing you here is anything anyone can do where I'm saying, take my travel policy and turn it into a set of emojis, a set of notifications with emojis, being friendly, telling travelers what the rules are, and then tell me where these should appear. So I'm going to upload that policy, and then it's basically going to just summarize my full policy and break it down into those things. So I gave very clear instructions what the format is, what my expectations are, so what I want out of it. Now I'm going to take one of these and show you how we use the FCM extension, which is some technology that FCM has, to actually bring these into life so that they're relevant and visible to the traveler. So we're going to use this one as an example. I'm now in the admin dashboard of the extension tool. So I'm just giving my notification a name. I'm going to say this is a custom one that I want to show up on Concur hotel results page. So I'm deciding where I want this to display. And then I'm actually just going to paste in what I had written there. We have this built into the tool, so you can actually don't have to go back and forth between ChatGPT. But I wanted to give you an idea for those who aren't extension users, how you could use AI as well. But so I created that notification. I'm just going to go grab an image. So get a picture of a brunch. And put that into that notification. So again, it feels a little bit warmer, more interesting than just a 40-page travel policy. All right, so I've added the image, and in the tool you can actually use AI to rewrite. So I'm going to make this funny. You can change the tone. Now, AI's version of funny is not maybe what everyone's taste is. It's but it's now saying go ahead and feast like a king, and it actually changed the image. So using AI. So I'm now going to show you the extension in action. And it's a browser extension, so it lives in my web browser and can see what I'm searching for on the travel sites. And then those notifications are targeted to that. So it sees I'm on Nashville, looking for a hotel in Nashville. We're highlighting the Boat Hotel because this has a great mix of, we've talked about the leisure or the need for relaxation. The Boat Hotel has a lot of activities, so you can see that. Link out to the site. I'm just going to, pick a hotel and show you. So let's say we're just going to go with this hotel, and you can sort of see the details. And there's that notification on the hotel page reminding me of my daily allowance. So again, it's my policy, but it's broken into these little snippets and nudges that can help you with those decisions. Now, if I search for Dubai, I've got a few notifications. We've talked about the LGBTQ plus information, and I've actually linked that to a resource site that you can read about, so your travelers have that information at their fingertips. We also know sustainability is important, so we're now showing you, what the carbon impact of this trip is, and reminding travelers that, especially during summer, we have extreme heat. These are all very configurable and controllable, but just these like little nudges along the booking path. We now also actually look at the top results that have been brought in on Concur, and actually showing you on the right hand side there what are the top 2 most sustainable choices. So again, it's this little nudge driving adoption. These are just some other ideas. You can create QR codes that help people download apps, reminding them to reuse their towels, or telling them in different cities what metro systems to take. Take in Stockholm or in London, take the tube, and giving some information. So just kind of friendly nudges, explaining what people should do and what. This is one from San Diego saying you should walk, stay at this hotel because it's walking distance to the office. Or if you're thinking of extending your trip, you need to pay the difference in that. So all of these are just really kind of like encouraging people to make the right decisions with data at the point of sale. This is another one showing you that the company is offsetting the travel. It's just an embedded YouTube video. So just showing you the tool's very flexible and you can embed different media types, GIFs, videos, etc., to make it more engaging than a PDF. And that is, I think it's restarted. So let me stop that. Thank you, everyone, for that. I'm going to throw it back to the group.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Daniel. One of the things that strikes me about this kind of technology is like it really highlights sort of this idea of universal design, where if you're designing with Gen Z in mind, honestly, everybody benefits. It's sort of that idea of, like automatic doors designed for people in wheelchairs, but it benefits everyone who uses them. Just like seeing the ease of that experience and getting that information at your fingertips is incredible.
Yeah, that I was thinking that earlier when everyone was talking earlier, is that unfortunately, my generation is a geriatric millennial, which means I was between 80 and 85, which, do not appreciate that. But everything we've talked about here is just as relevant and beneficial. So I think that one positive way to look at all this is really the Gen Z desire for all of this information and change is driving benefit for everyone, for all travelers of all generations and ages. So I think it's overall good strategies to follow, no matter the age of your traveling population.
Mm-hmm. We did have a question come in for you. It says, does it work with Citric OBT as well?
It does. It works on 2,000 travel sites. So you can have it working on Expedia or American Airlines, so you can actually communicate to your travelers there. Sometimes that's around leakage. So you could say to someone, hey, don't book directly on this OTA because we can't support you, we can't help you. So you're not just saying you're not allowed to do this, you're explaining the benefits of why you should use the OBT. But it works on Deem, Citric, Concur, FCM booking. So it works on multiple OBTs as well as 2,000 consumer sites.
Awesome, fantastic. I'd like to open it up to the panel just to share any kind of like additional thoughts, tying things together. If people who are attending today or sort of rewatching the recording were to keep in mind one thing, what would that be? I'll start with Tyler.
I think the big thing that I always talk about is really thinking about people's individual travel profile and having the tools, the programs, the policies be able for those individual Gen Zers to really make it their own, because they're going to have things in their background that are unique to them, and they want to know what is the company doing to support me. And so keeping that individual risk profile in mind is one of the most important things when we think about unique demographics, specifically when we're looking at Gen Z.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Tyler. Before I move on to some more kind of wrapping up thoughts from Lydia, I have another question that came in asking, does the FCM extension work across other websites or just your booking tool?
No, it works at 2,000 other websites. So it's your OTAs, your hotel, Hilton, Hyatt, Expedia, Orbitz, Airbnb, as well as most of the booking tools. So that's why it's an extension, so that it's not tied to one website. By being in your browser, it actually is able to communicate to travelers across the web. But it is restricted to travel sites, so it's not going to pop up on Facebook or Target or anything. It's not paying any attention. It's only a certain number of URLs that are travel sites that when it sees a travel site, it turns on, and then it can communicate to your travelers.
Great to know. Lydia, I'd love to hear from you and just sort of like, what's your kind of number one takeaway for those in attendance today?
I think just those communication channels are so important. Again, inside of your work life, it can be different versus your personal life with those communication channels. But I think having everything sort of live on your phone these days, ensuring that communication is in your face via text, via push notification, whatever channel you might use. And like Tyler said, keeping the individual in mind. So those needs, whether it be if their DEI needs or if their needs like balancing your wellness on a trip. I think those are so important, especially when it comes to seeking out companies that you're choosing to work with. I think we really value, of course, what can we bring to the company, but what can they also bring for me and my life and my balance of work and life and wellness.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah, definitely like that sort of symbiotic relationship. I love that. Thank you, Lydia. Daniel, any sort of last thoughts or sort of top things to remember for people in attendance today?
Yeah, I would say it's really about first principle thinking. So don't just take what you've inherited when you joined your job as correct and the default. So whatever role you're in, if you're a travel manager, um, if there's a travel policy that's been in place for 10 years, really like look at that from first principles and say what are we doing? Is this still logical? The status quo is not always right, and the way technology is moving the world forward and the way the different generations think about and prioritize things, it's really taking a fresh eye to old policies and procedures and making sure they're still relevant in today's world.
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much. I want to share a thank you to everybody who joined us today in this conversation. Those of you who left questions in the chat. Really, it was a pleasure having a chance to kind of dive into this topic with you, Lydia, Tyler, and Daniel. We'll be sending out a follow-up email soon, so please keep an eye out for that. It has some great information recap. You can watch the recording if you want to sort of catch up on any of those details. Again, thank you so much, everybody, for joining us.